I'm sure all who view this video have gotten into a contract at some point in their lives. Contracts are there to legally bind an agreement in a more formal way. An agreement may require a sign or a verbal promise. We all know agreements are very important. Well, this video is about the most important agreement that anyone could possibly become a part of. And most people, including myself before I took the time to look through the scriptures for the purpose of learning about the covenant, only have a vague idea of what the covenants are and the mechanism behind our salvation. While to receive salvation is very simple, as the gospel is simple, the plan for salvation that God thought up is extremely intricate. The first topic to cover is actually the Old Covenant. In fact, it is absolutely imperative that we do. Let's take a look at where the ratification of the Old Covenant took place. It happened in Exodus 24, where it says, Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the rules. And all the people answered with one voice and said, All the words that the Lord hath spoken we will do. And Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. He rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 pillars, according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the people of Israel, who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen to the Lord. And Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he threw against the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. And they said, All that the Lord has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient. And Moses took the blood and threw it on the people and said, Behold, the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. The law that the Israelites had to follow was in the previous chapters. It included the Ten Commandments and laws for daily life and the ways to treat others. And when Moses asked the people, it was the representatives that responded for the people. They agreed to the conditions. God, of course, agreed with the conditions because he was the one putting forth the covenant. Moses was playing the role of the mediator here. He was a witness to the agreement, and he declared the terms to make sure both sides understood them. The splashing of the blood represented the commitment. When Moses splashed the blood on the altar, it represented God's commitment, and blood on the people represented the human's commitment. That meant both sides had promises to fulfill. Humans had to live according to the law, and God would bless them as a result. But, very sadly, humans could not keep their side of the deal and consistently failed to meet the conditions. This, however, was not the end of the story. Instead, God promised that he would institute a new covenant out of grace and mercy. The new covenant was promised in Jeremiah 31, where it says, Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my laws within them, and I will write it on their hearts. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And no longer shall each teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, Know the Lord. For they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. The term New Covenant appears again in the Last Supper, in Matthew 26, Mark 14, and Luke 22. And Paul also quotes Jesus in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 24 to 25. Now, can you see the parallel between the Last Supper and when Moses acted as the legal mediator at the ratification of the Old Covenant? Jesus parallels the phrases used by Moses. The only difference is that at the Last Supper, the word new was added. By announcing that the cup was the blood of the new covenant, he was taking on the role as the mediator. The drinking of the cup symbolized the splashing of the blood. The splashing of the blood on the representatives of the humans was done, interestingly enough, not by the disciples drinking from the cup, but actually Jesus drinking it. It is because Jesus was going to bear the responsibilities of the humans in the deal. Now, it is important to understand that the Last Supper was a symbolic act. Jesus was announcing to his followers what his sacrifice will mean, so that the new covenant would take effect immediately at the moment of his sacrifice. Unlike Moses, who was able to sacrifice the animals needed and then do all the mediating afterwards, Jesus wouldn't have been able to do that because he was a sacrifice. By announcing the blood of the covenant from his coming sacrifice before the sacrifice, the covenant would become legally bound at the moment of the sacrifice and the shedding of the blood. And so comes the moment of the ratification of the new covenant, when Jesus was crucified. His death and blood, of course, had the role of ratifying the new covenant. However, there were other vital roles his death and blood played in our salvation. One of these was a cleansing of sin. He was the perfect lamb to take away the sins of the world. The next two roles that his death and blood played are related to the single statement, "It is finished." The first is that Jesus finished, or completed, humanity's commitment in the Old Covenant. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 8 to 10 says this about Jesus' sacrifice. When he said above, "You have neither desired nor taken pleasure in sacrifices and offerings and burnt offerings and sin offerings. These are offered according to the law." Then he added, "Behold, I have come to do your will." He does away with the first in order to establish the second. And by that, we have been sanctified through the offering of the blood of Jesus Christ once for all. In verse 9, when it says he does away with the first, it means that Jesus completed the old covenant. And when it says he established the second, it means he established the new covenant. Jesus completed the old covenant by living the perfect life that all humans had failed to live. He took care of the humanity side of the deal in the old covenant by displaying perfect obedience to the Father and observing the laws. And when he said it is finished, the completion of all the humanity's work needed for the old covenant was declared. This is why Jesus emptying himself and becoming fully human as well as fully God was important. God came as a human to do the works that was required of humans, which is exactly what Jesus said he would do in Matthew chapter 5 verses 17 to 18. He said, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot, will pass from the law until all is accomplished." Which is why we are not living under the old law, because it was accomplished by Jesus at the cross. Another role Jesus' death and blood played that was related to the phrase, "It is finished," was the payment needed to be fulfilled by humanity in the terms of the new covenant. When Jesus said "it is finished," in the original Gospels, it meant paid in full. And the price he was talking about was the payment needed to fulfill humanity's side of the deal in the new covenant. Jesus did all the works needed to be done by humanity. So all that is left is God's commitment to be fulfilled. And since God cannot lie or break a promise, it is as good as done. Which is why Paul said we are predestined for salvation. Predestination doesn't mean people are chosen to be saved before they're even born. It means that people who become part of the covenant by believing in Jesus are guaranteed salvation because God cannot lie. That is what makes salvation secure and makes believers predestined for salvation. So, what does this all mean? It means that God did absolutely everything, and we believers have nothing to do except to receive the benefits the new covenant has to offer through faith. The benefits is receiving forgiveness of sins, being protected from the wrath of God, and having everlasting life. We will be able to love God and know Him. And the only requirement of us is really believing in Jesus Christ and wanting the new covenant. And warning, if you want a different covenant where any sort of work is required, you will get what you want. So just know this. Acts chapter 10 verse 43 says, "To him all the prophets bear witness that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name." In conclusion, Jesus took on the role of the human's representative to do all the work necessary for the new covenant, which we are the recipients of the promise of God. And this was foreshadowed all the way back in Genesis 15. God makes a covenant with Abraham that his descendants will have the land promised. They go through a covenant cutting ceremony where they cut up animals and then walk between the carcasses of the animals. This was to ratify the covenant and a way of showing commitment to the agreement. By walking through the path between the carcasses, a person is saying, "If I break the promise, let me become like these animals." And here's the beautiful part. When it came to the time to walk the path, Abraham fell asleep, and a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between the pieces. This showed right from the beginning that God committed himself to us, and that he would bear the consequences of our failures himself, which is exactly what happened on the cross. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you will learn something. I certainly did. Well, have a great day, everyone. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.